Okay, I guess we can start with the roll call.
I'm going to just ask Member Fassoon, before we even begin anything else, she has a bit of a statement because she's online today. So go ahead.
Hi everyone. I'm participating remotely because I have an illness that could be contagious to other people. So that's why I'm participating on Zoom tonight.
And Member Fassoon, can you also disclose if there are any other adults in the room with you?
My roommate is 18 plus.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we can move along to the roll call now. Committee Member Fassoon?
Here.
Committee Member Hodges?
Here.
Committee Member Larson?
Here.
Committee Member Lieberman?
Here.
Committee Member Melgen?
Here.
Committee Member of Heel McClanahan? And Chair Mohammed.
Here. Now we can move on to the land acknowledgement. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lishan. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to these indigenous peoples, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. We will now move on to the approval of minutes.
As usual, we have our minutes from last month, our meeting on September 20th. So this is a time if any of the members of the committee have comments or questions or edits to make. And otherwise, there can be a motion to approve the minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay. Member Fassoon?
Yes.
Member Hodges?
Yes.
Member Larson?
Yes.
Member Lieberman?
Yes.
Member Melgen?
Yes.
Member Vahil McClanahan?
Yes.
Chair Mohammed.
Yes. Okay. Now we can move on to public comment.
So this is the period of our meeting that is general public comment for items not on the agenda. If any members of the public would like to make a comment, please raise your hand using the raise your hand feature on Zoom. We do have a few comments. Sorry, we're having some technical issues. Just a moment. Okay. First speaker, please go ahead.
Thank you. This is Nick Peterson, Albany Climate Action Coalition. I wanted to, I realize that Climate Action Committee is going through some transitions. Staff people have left, we have new members. But I think this is an ideal plan for CAC to move quickly on completing their new 2023-25 work plan. The 21-23 has now lapsed and we're a few months into the next work plan session. And that should build on the successes of the 21-23 work plan, specifically in building electrification, zero emission transportation, and urban forest development as funded by Measure DD. I think we can say most of the successes that came in this last 2-year period were based on having the funds provided by DD that gave us the opportunity to show the residents of California that real progress can be made. So I think what we need to do is pursue that further and then look at in the 2024 election cycle to increase the utility tax on gas and reduce it on electricity, which I think would have a very good chance of passing, given that voter participation will be very high this year, and Albany residents are well informed on climate change urgency. I strongly request that the CAC make this commitment to a focus on these issues in the 2023-25 work plan and not be sidetracked by issues tangential to climate change, but be laser focused on reducing emissions and assisting those in Albany that have the biggest challenge to achieve the carbon neutrality. According to the latest IPCC report, there's a rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a livable and sustainable future for all. All means all of us and all future generations of humans. That's billions and billions of people. And I think Albany can really show leadership in this, how a small community can come together, tax itself, and use those taxes constructively to bring about real and immediate meaningful impact on reducing our emissions. So I encourage you to use this urgency to really put your back behind this and put forward suggestions to the City Council that will use the DD funds to bring down emissions and inspire Albanians to work towards zero emissions as quickly as possible, 2045 being much too late. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. We will now go on to the next speaker. You may begin.
This is Lucinda Young, and I would wholeheartedly second what the previous speaker spoke to. And I would encourage all of the members here to read. There is a summary of the IPCC report. Perhaps all of you have already read that. If you haven't, I would strongly encourage each of you to read that summary. There is, it's written for lay people, and I will be happy to send a link to that if anyone has not read that yet. I was also concerned about the lack of a current work plan. I see that the only work plan that is posted on the website expired June 30th, and that the committee is supposed to draft a work plan during the first half of the year, and I didn't find that anyplace, and I don't recall that being discussed at any of the previous meetings, so I think that needs to be prioritized, that we get a work plan in place. And also, there's supposed to be a review of the 2-year work plan that just passed to analyze what got done, what didn't get done, and why. I would encourage the committee to work on that, and I look forward to this next 2-year period being a period when the committee really gets some climate action accomplished. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We'll go on to the next speaker. You may begin.
Thank you. Yes, I just want to support the previous 2 speakers. Nothing more I can really add other than just feeling kind of frustrated and impatient with how slow the process takes and action takes. I mean, I get it. It's nothing happens fast, but I think we could speed things up and hoping with the next 2-year work plan, we can be a little bit more aggressive in our goals and actions. And thank you all for your service.
Thank you very much. I believe that is all for public comment.
Thank you, guys. We will now go on to the next item, which is announcements.
Yes, I have a few announcements for the committee today. The first is that the Giltrakt Farm is hosting a harvest festival on October 29th from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. That'll be held at the Giltrakt Farm here at San Pablo and Marin. And I believe there will be some compost-based festivities as well, going along with the compost hub. And then secondly, I wanted to announce that there is going to be new funding, new incentives for heat pump water heaters available through the TECH program, TECH and SGIP. That will be announced with more details at the end of the month. That's when it's launching, and information about that program, as well as other rebates through the TECH program and a whole variety of incentives, are available on switchison.org. That program is run through contractors, so the incentives are paid to the contractor, then carried through to the customer, and the heat pump water heater incentives are starting at $3,100. So pretty exciting. And then finally, another exciting announcement. The City of Albany has been selected for the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant in the competitive program. Very exciting news. We're one of 12 communities throughout the country that have received this competitive grant, and the only one on the West Coast. This grant was awarded for a pilot program that we've been developing that would be to decommission a natural gas pipeline. So we would be working on electrifying an entire city block and then decommissioning the pipeline that feeds that block. So this grant would be covering the next phase of the project, which would be focused on outreach and building assessments and kind of working out a lot of the details about how that might work. It's a very new idea that hasn't been fully tried to before, so very much a pilot. We're excited about the grant. It's a $200,000 grant from the Department of Energy. And we're still working on a lot of the logistics, so we'll be coming back to the committee in the next several months with a lot more information on that and areas for the committee to provide input on the details of the program.
Can we ask questions about the announcements? I'm just wondering if the first one, the switches on heat pump water heating, what the geographic, like, is that for Albany or is it beyond Albany?
Yeah, that's for the entire state of California. Yes. Any other questions?
That's fantastic news about that block grant thing. Is that something we applied for, or?
Yes, yeah, staff applied for this over the summer.
I know it's new and you're just getting going, but when you have, your feet under you, it'd be awesome to have like a presentation on that. I think like how we applied for it and how we're staffing up for it, and how you're delving into that. I'm sure you will, but that's fantastic. Great, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
Are both of those things we can get into the City of Albany notifications that come out citywide? You know how we get like a newsletter is it monthly? Oh my gosh, I'm really proud of you guys. Thank you so much for making that happen. And I think everyone should know about that. And then as enough information is available about the state e-com rebates as well.
Yeah, I'm sure we can get that into the e-news. Yeah, great idea.
Great work.
Any other questions? If not, I think we can open up to public comment.
Okay, first speaker, you may begin.
Thank you very much. Nick Peterson again. I really want to commend staff for doing this. This has been, I know kind of people who've been working on this pruning of the gas lines and getting the utilities on board to do this. I've been working on it for years, and I think bringing this forward and actually getting this grant is huge. It's huge, and accolades all around to those of you who put effort into this. The thing I want to emphasize is that this opens up even more effort. Be careful what you wish for. But again, I think this comes down to making sure City of Albany, with the resources we have, this $200,000 grant plus PD funds, that we have the staff that can really focus on this. This has to be focused on in order to move forward. It can't have staff that's working on 5 or 6 different things, wearing different hats. I know we just lost our sustainability coordinator, and I really encourage the city to look at establishing, and I think we've proven we can raise funds for this, but a full-time person that's just dedicated on making sure climate action issues are being pursued throughout the entire city and that everything the city does takes this into consideration and supports them in doing this. It doesn't just burden them, it actually provides grants, provides information, researches grants, brings money in, does that as a 100% time person. And I think that would be, you know, have someone like that reported directly to the city manager. I think this would put Albany in just a much better position to really carry out what is going to be extremely challenging and time-consuming work. And we don't have time. We're running out of time. It's nice to know this grant's coming, and you know, in half a year we'll come back with some information, and then another year later, you know, find out more. But we need to do it faster than that. And I think unburdening current staff, having more people involved, really focusing on it is the way to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. We will move on to the next speaker now.
Yes, this is Lucinda Young again, and once again, I agree with the previous speaker. Thank you. And really incredible news about this $200,000 grant, and big thanks to all the staff members who worked on that. I do have concerns, like the first speaker, that whether we have adequate staff to implement, to really effectively use this $200,000, as well as the, you know, we've got a pot of DD funds that haven't been spent as well. And Michelle, you do a tremendous job, but you're one person. And I know with Lizzie having gone recently, and I don't know if there are plans to find a replacement for her, but I do have concerns about whether there's adequate staff. And I'm wondering if some of this $200,000 grant, as well, or some of the DD funds, might be used to fund another position. And there are, besides this grant that has come down from the Department of Energy, there are a whole lot of other grant money coming down the pipe with the Inflation Reduction Act. So I feel that attention needs to be focused on adding some staff to help us really take advantage of this great funding. Thank you, and thanks again to everybody who worked on this. Really, really great news.
Thank you for your comment.
Okay, now it's open to discussion for the announcements.
So I have a question pursuant to what the commenter said. I had assumed that you were, because you're sitting in that chair, that you were going to be doing Lizzie's job function, but that's not true.
Not entirely. You know, I haven't taken over Lizzie's position. I have taken over her role as the staff liaison to the Climate Action Committee, and some other aspects of her role, and other staff members have filled in some of the other gaps. So every time we have a shift in staffing, because we're so small, everything kind of moves around a little bit, but we make sure that we have everything covered. And, you know, always looking to build up our staff as needed and whatnot. So I haven't taken over Lizzie's job exactly as it was, but I have filled in some of those gaps, especially serving with you all here.
That's helpful. And then do you have any information about whether there's a plan with the city to bring one more person on, having lost a person?
I don't know if we have specific information available yet, but yeah, we're always making sure that we have enough staff to, you know, complete the projects that we're working on. So, one way or another.
Okay, if there are no more comments, I think we can move on to the next item, which is presentation.
Just get this going quickly. Okay, our first presentation today is update and clarifications on Measure DD revenues. So I'll start out with just a little bit of background, recapping some of the things that we spoke about a few months ago. So Measure DD is a measure that was passed back in 2020. It's a utility users tax, so on gas, water, and electricity for all the users of those utilities, as the name suggests. This revenue is added to the general fund. It's not a special fund, so what that means is that it goes into the big pot of money that the city can use for any type of program. It's not isolated to specific uses. However, the measure did include language stating that the city council would endeavor to spend at least 1/3 of that additional revenue to fund action items in the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. So the city council is, committed to spending 1/3 of that money on climate action items. And one of the ways that can be done, just logistically, is placing the funds in a reserve fund. It's within the general fund. It can be used for anything at any time, but it is kind of being tracked and kept watch over because it does have that intention of being spent on climate action items. So that's kind of some background on Measure DD. Big clarification here. I got the number wrong when we had our last discussion on this. There's a bit of a confusion because there's the money that comes in from the utility users tax as a whole thing, and then there's also money that comes in from Measure DD, which was an increase to the original tax, and then there's the 1/3. So there's kind of like 3 different numbers there. So I incorrectly stated last time that there was an estimated $750,000 per year for climate action. That's actually the increase that comes from Measure DD. So the revenues from Measure DD is an estimated $750,000 per year. The 1/3 of that's intended for climate action is $225,000 per year. So that's the estimated revenue. Since we spoke last time, we also do have actual numbers on revenue. So I can give you a little bit more context now than we did before. So this is a chart of real revenues. So in the first column here for fiscal year 21 and 22, because it switches halfway through the year, the Measure DD revenues were $515,000. So a little bit lower than we had expected, but it took a while to get the actual users tax up and running and get all the logistics hammered out. So the 1/3 for climate was $170,000. And then in fiscal year 22-23, it actually exceeded expectations with the Measure DD revenues being $810,000, and then the 1/3 for climate, $270,000. So over those 2 fiscal years, we come out to a total of about 1.3 million Measure DD revenues and 440,000 in that climate specific group. Or reserve fund, what you might call it. So that's the total numbers we actually have. And then on the last column here, we have the appropriations. So this is money that's been appropriated for specific climate programs. For instance, we have the heat pump rebate program, we have the multifamily EV charging pilot program, and then there's also the waived fees for street trees. So in fiscal year 21-22, that was $120,000 appropriated, and then in 22-23, that was $65,000 appropriated. So that's a total of $185,000 that have been appropriated. Appropriated isn't exactly money that's been spent, but it's been reserved for this specific program. So we can think of it effectively as being money that's been spent. So those are our actual numbers. I apologize again for my mistake earlier, but hopefully this not only clarifies but also gives us a good amount of detail on the actual funds itself. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jeff Bond, our Community Development Director now, and he's going to talk a little bit more about how this fund works in context of the budgeting process and what kind of role the CAC plays in all of this. So Jeff, go ahead.
Thank you, Michelle. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Jeff Bond. I'm the Community Development Director, and it's nice to be back with the Climate Action Committee. What I wanted to do for a moment is talk a little bit about the city's budgeting process and how that works in the timeline and how I think the committee can be most effective in developing programs that take advantage of the funds that we have, such as Measure DB. So there's two things on this slide. Bear with me for a second. There is the budgeting process, and then there's the program development process. And to summarize our budgeting process in a nutshell, across a variety of different departments doing different things, is we're really program driven. So as we're developing our budgets and we definitely budgets for 2-year periods of time. We last did this in the spring of 2023. We'll do this again in the spring of 2025. We make some interim adjustments along the way between those 2 dates. But the target really, I think, as the committee is thinking about programs in the future, new programs, should be developing a program beginning to develop a program now, actually, so that by the end of 2024 or early 2025, you have a program that we then is fully developed. We know how much money we need, and it fits in nicely to the budgeting process that will be beginning in the early 2025. So what this graphic is trying to show, the darker blue arrow is the program development, which we encourage to occur over the next year or so, and then the lighter blue arrow is the budget preparation process, where we would be preparing the budget in 2025 and spending it between 2025 and 2027. In the past, there's been some fear that if somehow we don't spend the money, we lose it. That's not our approach to budgeting in Albany. Other cities, other government agencies sometimes have that approach. That's not our approach here. So I just thought that would be helpful context as thinking about where Measure DD is today, and more importantly, kind of bigger picture over the next year or two, to think about first the programs that you want to fund, and then we'll get the money to implement those programs. So I'll pause there and turn it back over to Michelle. Of course, I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
So, Jeff, you were referring to 2-year cycles. Is the Albany budget a 2-year budget, or is it an annual budget?
It's primarily a 2-year budget. We prepare a document that lasts for 2 years. We make adjustments. Legally, we have to appropriate funds on an annual basis. So you'll see, usually in the middle of the year, we'll make a little tweak or two if something emerges, or revenues are higher or lower or whatever. There'll be an a minor adjustment, probably every May, like in May of 2024, there'll be a minor adjustment. But the big programmatic decisions are made every other year in a 2-year budget.
So looking at that, the visual you shared, if a concept were to come out of this committee now, then there would then be a process of, analysis, fleshing it out and so forth, in preparation for the budget cycle that gets approved spring of 2025. So I'm curious about the funding for that process of analysis and piloting and stuff like that. Does that need to be sort of approved ad hoc by the city, or does council just say yes, we want this to happen, and then staff carries it out?
Thank you for the question. So a very good question. There are degrees of flexibility that we have. So within our department, we can, Michelle and I working together can allocate up to $10,000 for hiring someone to help develop a program. Beyond that, the city manager has authority to hire someone up to $50,000. As long as we have funds appropriated in our department to do that, we can do that without going to city council. It's the big things that we need city council approval for it. So any sort of a contract or agreement that would ultimately expend more than 50,000 would have to go to city council. But I think getting to, if I understand your question correctly, if you feel like you need some technical assistance or what have you to develop a program, say, over the next year, if we could keep that under 10,000, it's super easy. And we have funds appropriated today in our budget that are shared among some of the other commissions and committees that our department serves, but I'm confident that we could spend those funds to help support the committee's work. If it's a bigger chunk, then it's a little bit more of a budgetary analysis on our part, but we could probably get there. It just, let us know what you would like in order to develop a program, and we'll do our best to support it.
Thank you. It's very helpful.
Let's see, I had a question. Thank you for explaining that the process there and how we would support it. I was just wondering, given that I guess it's a fairly long cycle and we might be towards the end of our, appointment here to the council by then, I was just curious, are there opportunities for budget adjustments within that period? Can you talk about some of that? Like, say we identify an existing program that could benefit from Measure DD funding injection to, help along, and not necessarily a new program.
I'd like to, we try to be opportunistic, and if an opportunity or, for that matter, an urgent need comes up, we would, we do occasionally go to council and ask for a special appropriation. It's, from an overall financial management perspective of the city, our finance director and city manager like to have kind of a big picture and keep us within bounds so that we're not bouncing around spending money without really some context. But, yes, there will be things that come up, I'm sure, over the next couple of years, particularly with this grant that Michelle was just telling you about. We may end up needing to spend some money that we don't know about yet. And we'll act, hopefully, in a good, creative, positive way to take advantage of the opportunities that present themselves, or, hopefully not a problem that presents, sudden problem that presents itself, but for that matter too, we do things change suddenly, and we may have to spend some money where we're not expecting to. But basically, the big picture is we're trying to keep our department within the basic parameters of what the city council's approved for the next 2 years.
All right.
Another question. I was just thinking about the DD funds, and we have an estimate of what that revenue will be in terms of what's to be used for climate action. And, I on the committee, kind of think about how I can propose projects that would go towards, using that money for climate initiatives. Is there already a set of programs that are, since we know what the revenue stream is going to be, do we already have programs lined up against that in the budget for taking, for spending on climate action things? And does the city staff already have that lined up, or are you looking for new things to come through the city council? I don't know if that was clear or not.
Yeah, no, I understand your question. I think Michelle enumerated a few minutes ago some of the programs that have already been established that we're using the Measure DD funds for, and she has the numbers committed to memory better than I do. And so, we could develop more programs or expand those programs. I expect that we'll be coming back to you to give you a report on some of those programs. And then, yes, if the committee has some ideas and it looks like would be feasible for Albany, then we can add. At that point, we would need to go to City Council to get their approval of the program, but the funds would already be there. So it's really making sure that this is it's not so much about the money per se as it is the program where they want to put money. You follow what I'm saying?
Okay. All right.
One more budget details question. So you shared with us the revenue so far. Conceptually then, those, rather than being spent sort of in real time, like we got the revenue last year, we'll spend it this year. Are we thinking about that sort of like piling up in a fund for use in the next budget cycle? Or is it kind of there right now? And it can be used for climate stuff that's already enumerated in the existing budget?
Do you want to take this one, Jeff, or should I go for it?
Go ahead, Michelle.
Okay. Yeah, it's a bit of a tricky question, I think, especially because, as I've said, these are general fund dollars. So the council does, the council can put this money into a reserve fund, like I mentioned, so that it's sort of kind of sitting in the bank, as it were, to be spent. However, the council, often, or at least they're kind of advised to wait a little while, because a lot of times the numbers aren't finalized until a little while after we kind of get them in. I think our finance director told me, these numbers that I showed you technically aren't absolutely final after we go through our audit and everything. So it's generally good practice to not necessarily put everything in a reserve fund or spend it in a certain way until a little while after we've really made everything settle down. But yeah, if they put that money in the reserve fund, then theoretically it could be multiple years that it's building up in the reserve, ready to be spent on climate projects. Although at any point, say there's some major earthquake and then we need to take that money out and spend it on something else, they can do that whenever they want to. You have anything to add to that, Jeff? Hopefully I got it pretty well.
Yeah, I think you answered, you said the same thing I was going to say, so I hope we both answered the question.
Great. That's what I'm always trying to do, is say what Jeff would say.
And that reserve fund, it doesn't really formally exist yet, correct?
I believe it does exist. I would have to check to make sure with our finance director, but I believe there has been money put into a climate action reserve fund in the past, but I'm not 100% certain on the details of that, so I could come back with more information.
On that one, I can add, Michelle, that it is being tracked separately, and I should explain why there's kind of a nuance to this. Measure DD was passed as it was called the general tax, which only requires the majority of the voter to approve it. And a general tax can be used for anything the city wants to spend money on. If it were solely dedicated to climate action, it would be characterized as a special tax, and then it would require two-thirds vote of the voter, approval of two-thirds of the voters. So the kind of the promise that we've made to the vote is not to lock it down in a safe with only climate action. We have to kind of keep it in the general fund pot, but then sort of within that pot, tracking it separately. And so it gets a little fuzzy. We want to be honest with the voters that they voted for, and not treat what is a general tax as a special fund, because then we would be misleading the voter and subject to potential challenge if somebody would upset about that. So there's a little bit of a nuance to it, but we are tracking it with the finance department. We will be keeping you and city council apprised of its status from time to time.
Thanks, Jeff. I just want to sort of make sure I'm tracking. So there were 440K that has been accrued in the climate bucket, right? Yeah, there you go, that bottom of that middle 185K appropriated. So that kind of leaves 255 unencumbered. That's just a number I don't see there, but right, it's the difference between those two numbers. Would we know if that money has been used for other purposes? Like, is there some kind of trigger? I don't know if this is a Jeff question, but like, is it a fair assumption to say that there are 255,000 unencumbered climate dollars, or do those just sort of erode as things are spent and the city council finds other purposes, or is there some kind of reporting function on that amount, or am I trying to put too fine of a line on it right now?
I think your math is correct, that if you came up with a program today that was going to cost $250,000, we could go to the city council and say, there's this measure, this 1/3 of Measure BD, the council's made this statement that they intend to use it for climate action related activities, and it's a nice fit, and we could have a good story to tell. I want to stress kind of starting with the program rather than worrying about what happens to the money. The money, I don't think there is any intention to put the money into, a recreation program or, that's the first thing that popped into mind. Something that's wholly unrelated to climate change. But as Michelle said, theoretically, if we're in a financial crisis, whether it's because of a disaster or a recession or what have you, those funds could under those circumstances, then I think they would need to be fairly dire circumstances going to the council. But then they could say, gee, we're really sorry, but we've got a crisis on our hands. We need to use that money for something else. But in the meantime, you may not see it tracked in a formal way in say, an audit, but we're tracking it and we'll be able to report it back to you.
Thank you.
I'm curious if you know by what margin Measure DD was passed?
Oh, gosh. I know it's easy to find on our webpage under the city clerk's office department. There's a page that has all the election results. I don't recall the number.
I want to say it was like 60, but
Okay,
I could have a foggy memory. You should go check.
yeah. So that makes all the difference in future funding questions and how we want to fund stuff. I will look into it. Thank you.
I see 58.05% said yes.
Ooh, that's close.
All right, if there are no more questions, I think we can move on to public comment.
We'll begin public comment with the first speaker, and you may begin.
Yeah, thank you very much. Nick Peterson with Albany Climate Action Coalition again. So I think what's, this is all what Jeff is giving you as the business as usual sort of, this is how funding and stuff happens in Albany. But we're not business as usual. We are in a crisis. So when city staff talks about a crisis coming up, we're in that. We're in that right now. And I think what's missing is the recognition of that amongst city actions and what's going on. So I request that the Climate Action Committee take a proposal to the City Council to declare a climate emergency in Albany, in the world, and that everything the city does will be looked through in a lens of climate action and making sure that we're not doing things to make the situation worse. We need to lead in this. We're a first world, very affluent community. If we don't do it, then we can't expect anybody else to follow along. So it's the example we're setting that's most important. The Albany itself could probably continue to burn carbon the way they have for the past 50 years, and it wouldn't matter at all, but that's not the point. So I think it's really important for the Climate Action Committee to have that sense of urgency, not business as usual, not wait 2 years before they start spending this money, tie up all the sins and everything. I think what Dan pointed out is true. There's, $250,000 sitting in a bucket that the city council in its current configuration has agreed to spend on climate change. And you guys need to tell them how to spend it ASAP so they start spending it and we start doing something, because we can't wait years. Really, read the ICPP. I mean, it's like, we're going over the edge of the cliff. And if we can't do it, if we just sit around doing business as usual, going through the same old plotting processes of budget reconciliation and this, that, and the other, if we can declare the emergency, have this funds be identified as something we want to really get out there and start doing some things, get someone dedicated. I appreciate what Michelle and others and Lizzie and Jeff have done, but the city has not prioritized this enough. And I see them flipping their hats on and off. Michelle isn't 100% dedicated to this, neither was Lizzie. It's always been, there's not enough staff, we can't do it. So let's get the staff, let's use this money. We have $250,000 right now that could be going towards this. Let's have the city declare a climate emergency, and let's start acting as if this is a true crisis and not that it's just something to tuck under the rug. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. We will move on to the next speaker.
Yes, this is Lucinda Young, and actually at last month's meeting, when new agenda items were requested, I asked the committee to consider declaring a climate emergency. There are over 2,000 jurisdictions around the world that have declared climate emergencies. Our sister cities, Berkeley, El Cerrito, numerous cities in California have declared climate emergencies. And it concerns me, kind of the overarching theme I heard from Jeff is that this money, it's not going anyplace, and that there's no urgency to use it immediately. It's not going to disappear. And I think what's really missing from the conversation is we are, as the previous speaker spoke, in a climate emergency. And as I mentioned in my first comment, if the committee members, and Jeff, you as well, if you have not read the IPCC report, there's a summary for policymakers, I would strongly urge you to do so. The report states there is a rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a livable and sustainable future for all, parentheses, very high confidence. So that, I think, is what is missing from Jeff's presentation. We are in a climate emergency. And there's $255,000 left there. As an Albany voter who voted for Measure DG, I want to see those funds spent for climate action. And $1 spent today is going to do a lot more to address this crisis than $1 spent 5 years down the road. That dollar is not going to disappear, but it's going to do a whole lot more work. The IPCC report, what we do in the next 7 years is going to be determinative of our futures. So I think also if we're going to go back to the voters and ask for more funds in the next election, the voters are going to want to see that this money has been spent on climate action. It's not just sitting in a fund that sometime in the future it's going to be spent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comment. We'll move on to the next speaker.
Hi, this is David Weimer. The two previous speakers couldn't have said it any better, so I'm not going to add to it. But I really, the proof is in the pudding. To me, it's like a no-brainer for the CAC to request that the council declare a climate emergency. I mean, if we can't even do that, then that really shows we are not stepping up to the plate and meeting the moment. So, I just can't imagine that you wouldn't do this. And so I look forward to seeing some action on it in the near future. and I hope you don't disappoint me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is all for public comment.
All right, we can move on to discussion for this presentation.
I would be interested in hearing from others on the committee about that proposal. We keep hearing from commenters to hire dedicated staff to work on climate. I'd be interested in all your reflections on the utility of doing that. It seems to me that given that funds exist, it's possible, it seems conceivably like achievable to do that. And then maybe that person can also, if they existed, look for co-funding from grants, keep pushing things along. So what do you all think?
Yeah, I think that we've talked about on this committee a lot that the staff would be a great place to put some of this money, because we always hear that there's research involved. There's, we can kind of do our own homework away from this committee as private citizens and bring proposals here, and that works. But having dedicated staff that's actually doing the research and moving programs into the process would be way more efficient and much more valuable for the climate action. Yeah, so I totally agree that getting dedicated staff with the DD funds would be a great move.
I like these ideas. I would say that I'm also thinking about the comment about the work plan being needed, like the 2-year work plan. And not that I want to delay, spending money that's available, that's appealing, but maybe tying it into the work plan. I just started jotting down some ideas, like, hiring a staff or maybe a consultant who could advise. A full-time staff is, like, you want to commit to the long term. It's sort of hard to use tax funding. That might be a little less certain in terms of longevity, but certainly hiring a consultant with expertise in the area to advise. And then there could, I'm thinking of things that we've talked about that have been brought up and dismissed as too expensive, and just sort of off the top of the head, extending the heat pump, incentives that the city has offered. We could, for $250K, you could do 200 incentives of $1,000 each, or you could do 5 EV charging stations that are $50K each, or you could buy a couple of EVs for the police department and get a charging station. Like, these things have understandably been sort of set aside in a parking lot, an EV parking lot, let's say. But, seeing these funds available sort of brings new life to them for me, but I do wonder if it should be part of a 2-year work plan, or if the effort of doing a work plan, which seems important, might be a way to sort of think through what option is best. And maybe that includes hiring someone, or maybe hiring a consultant. All of that stuff is appealing to me.
Yeah, I also agree that funding towards staff time for these type of projects seems important. I know in past meetings there had been a discussion of a need for more engineering manager support as well. That was one of the reasons I believe was discussed for funding one of the public chargers that had funds allocated not getting built because Public Works did not have the bandwidth to focus on projects outside of what they're is in their kind of legally mandated scope of things they need to work on. So definitely agree that that's an avenue worth exploring, and I would like to, I know kind of Measure D funds have usually been kind of pitched as program-based, but I would really like to see opportunities to be able to spend them on things that might not be full programs, but are just really good opportunities to nudge things over the line that just need a little more funding or a little more attention.
Is there a particular thing you had in mind for things that just need a little more funding?
Let's see. I think we've discussed one barrier to potentially putting in EV charging in near the library or other depots has been like needing to do an assessment of electrical capacity at the building. Like that doesn't seem that expensive and seems like something that could just use a little more, I don't know, a little more funds to get over the line. So I think there's lots of examples like that.
I'll just point out Jeff's has his hand on Zoom. No, everyone can't see, but Jeff, do you have something?
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. So I just like to first of all, acknowledge the urgency of the situation. We're certainly aware of that. We want to respond. I think as staff supporting the committee, we'll be much more effective in getting, whether it's staff resources or whatever, spending the $250 if we have a program that explains what we're going to use the money for. And I think the example that Member Lieberman was using, that maybe it's a heat pump program or maybe it's EV charging, those are two great examples that maybe we pursue one or both of those, but it's probably a different skill set, and almost certainly a different skill set of a person that we would bring in to do that. So that's why I continue to encourage you to kind of think about this initially from a program perspective, and then if you come up with a program and we want to implement it before the next 2-year budget, that's great. We'll take that recommendation to the city council, and we would say, we need staff support, or we need a consultant, or we need whatever we need in order to implement that program. Just going in and saying, we're going to hire somebody and then we're going to figure out what they're going to do is a much more difficult case to make. And if that's the way you want us to go, we'll respect that, but I think it's much better to start with a program that's compelling, and then we can I think, be much more successful and get the right person into the job.
Following up on that, to what extent are the strategies that we've got in our climate action plan, to what extent do those constitute all the program that we need? Because I see like a lot of a ton of progress has been made on that. Like I'm looking at it, reading it through and going done, 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 which is wonderful. But there are some more ambitious things in there. I guess I'm curious, like, from the staff perspective, when you look at that, does that feel substantive enough to like guide your work, or is part of what we're doing here just like clarifying and refining what's in the plan, making it more actionable?
I think I think the climate action plan is a great place to start. It's not the only place, but it's probably the best place to start. And I think it's taking those policies and programs that might just have a few sentences of description, and through the committee's work, really building building up that program, kind of testing the pros and cons, maybe coming up with a little pilot project or two just to see how it's going to work, or if it does work. And that would be something that would be terrific. And I think that's why we have the climate action plan in place, and so we can go back to that and have you all pick a few of the programs that you want to further develop, and then we've got money to execute on that. So I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I'll second what Jeff said, and also add that there's lots of actions in there that are fairly broad, which we did on purpose to some extent as the situation changes and technology and everything. And so there's a lot of places in the climate action plan where there might be a broad action where we could really delve into the specifics of what a program could look like to try to achieve whatever that goal is. So just another way to approach the CAP for programs.
I guess I'm thinking that where this is guiding my thinking is, I hear what you're saying, Jeff, about program base, and that's a much more specific, cell for the city council to get behind. It sounds like there is an opportunity for things like, we want to do this program and we want to research and initiate a pilot for this, and we need a consultant or staff to carry that through. So it could be a combination of new staff to do a specific project, I mean, or a consultant or a temp hire or whatever you want to call it, not just the investment of the program. Is that a correct read on what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
One other thing I want to mention, this is kind of on the edge of getting off topic of this particular agenda item, but in the future, we will be coming back to talk a little bit about work plans. There is a change coming in work plans, so the past practice is not expected to continue. Again, that's not on your agenda tonight, so we really shouldn't talk about it, but next month or sometime soon, there will be a different approach to thinking about what, I'm not even sure what we're going to call it yet. What was called work plans, there'll be something different coming up soon.
Just the only other comment that I wanted to make, just sort of in general, I appreciate the, you know, the description of the budget process, but in regards to some of the public speakers' comments, I don't personally feel that I'm inhibited from proposing projects at this point. I don't feel like I need to wait 2 years before proposing anything. Out of what all I've heard so far, I feel like I'm still, you know, empowered to go ahead and just do my research and propose stuff whenever. And there's DD funds and there's a process, and we'll keep going forward. We just need the idea pipeline to keep filling in. So.
Anything else? Any other comments?
I have kind of a procedural question. So we're talking about funds and budgets and so forth, and we had a sort of a sub-discussion about people's interest level in hiring staff. So if we want to talk more about that, where and when and how do we do that within the formal process of our meetings here?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, with any item or specific discussion, it's best to bring that up for future agenda items, and then we can put it specifically on the agenda so we can really delve into the details of any topic. And yeah, you know, if you're not sure exactly what that might look like, you know, you can kind of give a description, and then I can work with the chair and the vice chair and Jeff to kind of build what that item might be on the agenda.
Thank you.
All right, if there are no other comments, I think we can move on to the next presentation.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. My name is Sutton Payne. I'm the new Civic Spark Fellow, if I haven't made your acquaintance yet. But very excited to start working with Albany and address a lot of these issues that we're talking about and so passionate about. I'm glad to give an update on one of the CAP initiatives itself, the Street Tree Management Plan, which I think has been a while since this committee has gotten information on it. So we will start here with some background. Yeah, it has been laid out in a couple of Albany's plans, CAP in 2019, as well as the general plan, as well as several other urban forestry goals to incorporate a street tree management plan, to increase canopy coverage, work through some of these co-benefits, obviously, of integrating trees and tree management, as well as just overall urban beautification. Yeah, and then we'll continue on here. This is an updated timeline. I'm sorry if that's a little illegible, but this PowerPoint will also be available. Back in November of last year, we executed a contract with Arbor Pro for a street tree inventory, collecting data on species, state of their well-being, and such. That data collection took place from December of last year until about April 2023, as you can see when it was completed. In March of 2023, staff presented an RFP for consulting services, which was approved by council. And then recently, last month in September, council approved that, authorizing the execution of a contract with Hort Science to carry out the second phase of the street tree management plan, which I'll touch on in a second. Just a quick background, the plan itself is broken up into two phases. Phase 1 already having been completed, which was the street tree inventory itself. Again, completed through December, through April, and it's supposed to overall guide the plan, its goals, and the values that we want to integrate with it. Going here. One of the main results that we got from here is the community viewer, which gives us a view of all the street trees, vacant planting sites, as well as a couple other pieces of data like species statistics, growth space, and diameter at breast height, which is going to be really valuable for the consultants to use, for the city to use, to see where we need to best put our attention. We can go on to the next slide here. This shows you essentially what the community viewer looks like. It's accessible on the city website, but this would be an example of site number 1. It shows you the species, the growth space, as well as a couple other details. You can search by species, you can search by relative growth space, relative to diameter if you want. It's a really intricate data space that's going to be very valuable for pushing forward this plan. And go to the next one. Yeah, DBH, this is going to be very important for the consultants to use. It tells us a lot about the tree's biomass as well as its carbon sequestration potential. Obviously, that's going to be a big piece of addressing the carbon aspect of the CAP plan. And then we'll go on to the next one here, which covers growth space. As you can see, roughly 50% of our trees have relatively small, it's between the range actually of 25 and 30 inches of growth space. But again, this gives us a lot to work with the consultants on planting sites, as well as if it's going to affect sidewalk repair. And then this leads us into phase 2, which is where we are currently at. Includes the hiring of the consultant as well as the creation of the plan itself, which was just, the approval of the consultant was just carried out in this September. And then we will go forward. And current status, this is where we're sitting at now. Hort Science Consulting, this is a quick overview essentially of what their approach is going to be. You can see it includes some data analysis using the inventory, as well as engagement, outreach, as well as public education strategies, and then the development of the plan itself. This includes staff and funding recommendations, as well as performance indicators. So that's going to be very, very valuable for us. And then lastly, just a quick update. There was a study session that was held with council this Monday. They received similar updates to the plan, as well as a brief presentation from Hort Science discussing preliminary steps that are going to be taken. And then going forward, there is a tentative meeting scheduled to occur in December that will happen with Parks Commission as well as Hort Science to start with the initial steps of the plan. But yeah, we will love to keep giving you guys updates on this plan, and we'll come back to you if we need any type of guidance. But thank you very much. If you have any questions, feel free to refer them to us. Thanks.
Finally came into my wheelhouse, so I have kind of a lot of questions. It's great that our consultant is going to be doing public outreach. It's always nice to make sure that what we're doing serves the public. I'm really interested in the tangible actions that will come out of our street tree management plan. What I'd like to see there, in addition to the attributes that they've already cataloged, and maybe they've already cataloged this, is sort of like, what are the actionable attributes of this tree? For example, does it need to be removed? Does it need to be replaced? Does it need a bigger street tree well? How many bigger street tree wells do we need? How many places in the city could we have trees and we don't? How many places in the city have trees that will ultimately need replacing? How many of those trees are we able to tend with our really tiny Department of Forestry? And how much more labor do we need to fund? Because cities used to pay more money for their urban forestry than we do today. And that's something that we could help with as a committee, is sort of nudging us in that direction. But to guide our proposals, we need those kind of tangible data points from our consultant. Do you know anything about what they're offering in that respect?
Yeah, I can go ahead and touch upon, I guess, on your first point. A large portion of their services will also be including management advice, expertise, and suggestion in reference to these planting sites, as well as some expertise that we just didn't have with city staff in terms of canopy assessment, understanding where we can increase that to meet some of these goals that we have in line. I'm not sure if Michelle wanted to touch upon more.
Yeah, I have a few thoughts, but I'll let Jeff go if he has more things to add because he's been more involved than me.
I think your question is exactly the same questions that we have, which is, what do we need in order to achieve the vision that we all share of a significantly improve the tree canopy in the city. So, I don't know that it's going to go to the micro detail of looking at every tree well on every street, but certainly give some guidelines and parameters for decision-making, and both in the planting and the maintenance and ultimately into the life cycle of a tree, how to handle that. And then how many people do we need? What kind of equipment do we need so that we're successful? Right now, we have one urban forester. He works hard, but that's probably not enough. Do we need 2 or 3? I'm not really sure. And are we making the strategic investments that we should? Are we missing some opportunities? We're not sure about that. When we look at this plan, will give us those kinds of answers.
I'm also wondering whether the data that they gave us in the map format is also being made available to us just as a database so that you can look at it and play with it. Because maps are super slow to work with.
We have that in a GIS layer, and so the consultant will be working with the database using ArcGIS.
Yeah, no, so will staff in making decisions and council in making decisions be able to manipulate the data in the format that it's been provided to us so far?
If that's ultimately what people want to have, that would be great. I think we're hoping that we don't need individual people out there in our GIS system coming up with different answers. We're hoping that the plan, if people will kind of focus on the plan rather than, but if it helps people understand the direction we're going by playing around with the data a little bit themselves, I understand that. We're all kind of think that way, I think, ourselves. So I get that, but we're hoping to get away from sort of ad hoc decision making and have a more structured, focused program that gets us towards an agreed upon vision.
Makes a lot of sense. The spirit I'm asking it is earlier, a week ago or so, I was asking Michelle if we can look at our climate action plan in some format other than PDF. And that's what we own is the PDF. And I feel like this is intellectual property that we're paying someone for. So I'd sure like it to live with the city in formats that city staff can use. And it's pretty cumbersome to use it in map format. Put it out there. It would be valuable to have it in other more usable formats and anything that we're paying for.
Thank you for that comment, and we'll talk it over with and maybe we can reach out to you separately to understand better what format would be. We're trying to be helpful with this format, so if it's not working, we want to fix that.
All
All right, if there are no other questions, we can move on to public comment for this presentation.
Let me ask one more
Yeah,
question.
go ahead.
Sorry. This feels more like a rhetorical question, but for those who are on the Social Justice Subcommittee, and I'm not actually sure who's on that subcommittee, have you all discussed the way that street trees and environmental justice play out in our city?
Not really. We have because we're kind of focusing on the student outreach subcommittee right now. But we will keep that in mind.
Yeah, I would love to see that, because I imagine what we're going to see from this assessment is the tree canopy looks dramatically different depending on the income level of the block you're on. And I would love to see one of the recommendations coming out that we start to put some equity into future planting and tending. Thank you.
Okay. If there are no other questions, we can move on to public comment.
Our first commenter can go ahead.
Yeah, this is very exciting to see. Nick Peterson with Albany Climate Action Coalition. I know back when I was involved with the Climate Action Committee, one of the primary areas of focus was improving the urban tree canopy to have more shading and to be resilient to the changes in climate that are going to be coming to this area. And I think a lot of us, have this idea we could just get sort of these urban tree gorillas out there planting trees like mad and get a couple thousand trees planted right away, because trees, before you get that canopy, we usually buy, the 15-gallon tree, and it looks like a toothpick, and maybe in 10 years it'll be giving you the canopy, or 15 years. So it's really out there as far as the effect it's going to have. But it's important to do it in a worthwhile way. And I think this is kind of a good example of where having the urgency of climate action in place, you could identify a few factors that were critical to sift the data on, which is like which areas are most exposed, will have the most impact with lack of shading and heat, which ones have the most challenged communities, which ones have the fewest trees, and then you'd be able to look through this data and find areas to immediately do your impact, and maybe you would say, well, we're going to pick a few species that we know will do well under future climate change and provide canopy within a certain period of time and do a lot of carbon sequestration. And certain areas will just get those as quickly as possible. So it's a way to, rather than doing a whole bunch of stuff up front over years and years and then finally rolling things out ploddingly, that you would use more of a urgency sense to move along where it would be most effective. So I think this is, again, points out where if there was an ability for the city to invoke climate emergency, they could require consultants and staff to focus on the priority areas and get those addressed first. So kudos to staff for getting this. I think it's important to have this information. I certainly don't hope we do analysis paralysis for the next couple of years trying to figure a bunch of stuff out and come up with some overall plan that takes a lot to invoke, and that we do look at it through the lens of climate change and social justice. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other speakers on Zoom. Again, if you want to speak, please raise your hand. Okay, it looks like that's all. Back to you, Chair.
All right, we can move on to discussion for this presentation.
So I was looking at our climate action plan, and this is yet another thing. It's like, check, done. It's done, because it says create and implement a comprehensive urban forestry plan. So now the funds to do that are approved, and it's in action. So it's like we need like a ritual about where we all go, yay! this is like toast. Cheers. We could probably even do more, like to Jeff's point about like this is a great guide. The CAP is a great guide, and we can also do more. So I definitely look forward to hearing the proposals that come out of the recommendations that come out of this plan. And I think we're, as a city, definitely capable of doing more in this department.
Any other comments?
Yes, whatever comes out of this plan, and as we go along and get updates about it, I would definitely encourage all of us to keep in mind the significance of what the trees will provide in terms of, yes, carbon sequestration, but also just adaptation to climate realities. And just as a casual observer, it's sort of the first thing I noticed moving here a year ago is that like trees in many of our neighborhoods are kind of an afterthought. There are a few blocks where they're just beautiful and robust and well cared for and loved, and those are often the more affluent blocks. So we without many large changes, I think we could make a big difference. But we do have to probably pay some money to get some of the work done because it is many towns, tens of thousands of trees we're talking about. But I'm super glad that we're on the road to getting it done.
I'll also just make a quick note in reference to Member Vahey McClanahan's earlier comment that equity is very much a part of the planning process. That's been really put in the center of this, so we're definitely thinking about that as we go ahead.
All right. Would you like to add anything? No. Okay. Then I guess we can move on to the next item. Do you have something?
Yeah. I wanted to throw out an idea and get people to comment on it. And if people think it has merit, then I'll flesh it out in a proposal for our next meeting. It's kind of small potatoes compared to what we've been talking about. But the idea would be a home emission rank for the cities in Albany, the homes in Albany. Since most of us already pay for electricity that's 100% renewable or close to it, I would focus solely on natural gas. And I wonder if we could somehow get someone to calculate the annual carbon emissions per square foot from each Albany home, rank those, lowest emitter, highest emitter, whatever, and then communicate somehow to each household, here's where you rank emissions per square foot over the course of a year. And this would be not a mandate, and I imagine a lot of people would dislike it for that reason, but this would be a nudge. I can imagine that some people getting an email that said, you're one of the highest emitters, might be inclined to do something about it. More insulation or heat pump for space heating, something like that. So before I go too far on that, I have no expertise whatsoever in marketing. And this is sort of a general question, so input is really, really needed here. But those are let me just roll out the three top questions in my mind. First off, if we did roll out a home carbon emission rank, is it worth our trouble? How successful would it be? How do you think people would respond to it? That's really critical, because if people with expertise in marketing say, yeah, if you don't have a mandate, nothing's going to happen, then let's not waste our time. That's the first question.
Pardon the interruption, Chair Mohammed. When we're, this sounds really interesting. When we're off topic, is there like, do we say like point of process or something like that? What do we do?
Sorry, if we're off topic?
Well, because are we not, maybe I'm the one who's lost. I thought we were moving from the street tree management plan.
Yeah, we're on item 6.1, which is a presentation on the home electrification mandate subcommittee from Chair Mel,
Oh
or
my gosh,
Member
I'm
Melgen.
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm I'm so conditioned to looking for the
Yeah. Oh,
the
yeah.
presentation.
Yeah.
My apologies.
Yeah, just a spoken presentation this time.
And it's really informal, but the link here is that maybe this would spur electrification in the form of heat pumps specifically, maybe other things, but heat pumps. Anyway, so the first question, is it worth doing? The second question, if it is worth doing, how could we get it done? PG&E obviously has all of the natural gas data. I'm not sure whether they have data on the floor space for each gas account, or if they don't have it, how we could get it to them, or they could give us the gas data one way or the other. So there's a real question about how could it be done? And then the third question is, how could we roll it out? Because with privacy constraints, we can't just put this on the website and let everybody see what their neighbors are doing. So it would have to be, I guess, an email to each residential account, which would, again, probably involve PG&E. Maybe there's some sort of role for Bayren in here. But anyway, so those are the three questions that pop into my mind. I bet that other people have other ideas, other questions too. But I'll just open up the floor maybe with question number one. Do you think it's worth the trouble?
I'm just going to jump in really quickly with a point of process here. It's a little funny because the presentation is very question-oriented, but just to remind everyone that first we'll have questions from the committee for Member Melgen, and then public comment, and then we can go into discussion, which is probably the time for answering the questions that Member Melgen has proposed, if that makes sense to everyone.
Thank you, Michelle.
So just a question, not to your final question there, but just in thinking about this, so we know that in Albany, 50% of residents or so are renters. So would this cover apartment buildings as well? Is that data available for apartment buildings, or is this homeowners specifically?
If an apartment is on its own gas meter, it could go to the apartments too. I'd have to think about whether we want homes as a group ranked and apartments as a group ranked separately, because they're sharing walls, there's less heat loss and so on. I'd have to think about that.
Right, but at least getting to the landlord level would be possible, it sounds like.
I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, first of all, I'm terribly sorry that I did not know where we were in the agenda. I'm so sorry.
I frequently don't know where we are.
I'm wondering, because I know you have sort of a utility background, is that, 'cause I did not know that that data would ever be available. Is that something that would be made available to us as a city?
I've talked about this a little bit. I can't imagine that PG&E would just give us the data without some real serious limitations on it because of privacy constraints. So I think it would make sense to have asked PG&E to do it, or maybe there's somebody, maybe Bayren, some nonprofit, but certainly they just wouldn't hand over the individual data to Albany staff.
Okay, I mean, that was a really good question, because I was thinking that you meant that this would be a city-directed, communication, but that's not what you were saying. From the last comment, you're saying this could go something like that we as a city decide we want to do this, and we get PG&E to do the actual communication. No, it's not a full-fledged plan, but that's sort of the scenario that you're painting. Is that right?
I think it would have to go that way if PG&E would give us the rankings, and maybe Albany could send out emails to each individual home, but I doubt we have the ability to do that. So I think it would have to be PG&E.
Okay.
If there are no other questions, we can move on to. Wait,
I do have another question, actually. I mean, I was just thinking about this, that, you know, to your question of should we do that, or should we even consider this? It feels to me like, so would part of your program be sort of education and figuring out what the incentives are, what the, you know, it sounds like it would need to be a program that's pretty full-fledged as far as what's in it for the, you know, the person who's contacted. Is that part of the idea of this program?
It could be. Well, part of the motivation of people would be just saying, I don't want to be one of the highest emitters. I feel I'm, you know, concerned about climate, et cetera. So partly it would be just individual motivation. If we wanted to pair it with some kind of rebates for the highest emitters to help them to reduce their emissions, maybe that could be part of it too. I kind of doubt it, though. Part of a household might be in the highest emitters because they just really like to keep it toasty warm in the wintertime. And do we want to give them any kind of an incentive, a monetary incentive? There's interesting questions.
Okay. And I'm about to blur into discussion, so I'll stop there.
I think we can move on to public comment now.
Yes. All right, we will get started now with our first speaker. You may begin.
Yeah, Nick Peterson again, thank you. So I think, you know, we've talked about how to incentivize people at point of sale, maybe later on at some point in improving their homes to do the right thing and to move away from burning gas. I think what committee member Meglin has shown is really a shaming approach. And I don't think a shaming approach is really very beneficial or effective. I think this one, given the reach it would take and the need to really partner very closely with PG&E that makes money off piping gas to people's places, doesn't really sound like it's the way to go. But I would like to sort of nudge it back. I know committee member Meglin attended the recent Learn session that talked about the statewide home energy score process that's now underway with Bay Run and Stop Waste. And I attended that too and was a little discouraged to see that they're keeping it very close to the DOE analysis process for building efficiency, which does not really directly address electrification, which is the primary thing we need to be pushing people on. So again, this whole statewide focus is moving towards something that is, again, sort of a measurement that would come out and let people know how efficient the building was in using energy, not really what it's emitting or how much it's electrified. And I actually wrote the people who are working on that and told them they really need to work in electrification. You don't work in electrification, you're wasting time. You're giving people a tool that they can make their home look good when it really isn't. And I think we need something that really has teeth in it. So I would encourage you to look back at something I had proposed earlier, which the idea was you would establish it first just for homes that were coming up for sale and later roll it out for all homes. But it would allow a lot of flexibility. You could set the bar really low, gradually raise it up, but it is an incentive program. It incentivizes smart people to do things now to make their home less emissive in carbon. And people are going to latch onto that really soon, and they will start saying, hey, we've got this great score, this house is ready to go. Look, we put in the induction range, and everything's great. Please come buy it for an extra $100,000, which they will do, because that's how it works. So again, I think this sort of shaming approach, I would encourage all of you not to pursue this. I think it's sort of a losing path. Also, Albany won't have much control of all the PG&E hands. Thanks.
Thank you for your comment. We will move on to the next speaker. You may begin.
Yes, I'm Lucinda Young here again. I do recall that East Bay Mud for water scoring does something similar. On your water bill, you get a statement for homes similar to yours, how you compare to other water users. Personally, I don't think that is going to have that kind of scoring will have much, if any, impact on behavior, which is what I think the goal of this this proposal is. I think that people who are climate educated and who are concerned about doing their part to address the climate crisis are already going to do what they're going to do. And then on the other hand, there are a lot of people who are either climate unaware or who really don't care. And unfortunately, we do have a lot of people out there like that. And the fact that they may be in the 80th percentile for emitters, I don't think that's going to really have much impact. So my personal feeling is that this sounds like it could be a lot of work for minimal payback. And I think some other, Albany needs to somehow address the problem with existing homes and getting people to move away from gas toward electrification. I know there's been discussion about a point of sale requirement. I think that needs to be looked at in further detail, but my personal feeling is that this proposal would, what has been presented tonight would not be much bang for the buck. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I believe that is all for public comment.
All right, we can now move on to discussion for this item.
I'm intrigued by the idea, and I have some knowledge about this industry, which there's a pioneering company called O-Power that that sort of pioneered in the development of providing feedback reports to utility customers that compared them to their peers. PG&E, I just Googled it. PG&E did a $90 million deal with O-Power in 2015. I think all of this has happened in Albany. I can't say that with certainty, but I have a recollection that these reports were issued to customers in Albany by PG&E. And my thought is maybe we invite PG&E to come and present their learnings from that initiative. My general recollection is that these programs do move the needle, but not very far. So you get like a few % movement from homes. So that doesn't mean it's not valid or worthwhile. But I don't think that the carbon savings are great or that the behavioral changes are great, but they do exist. It's not, it was considered a, when O-Power was sort of gaining traction, a low cost and engaging way to get customers to think about their energy, and it was, in terms of comparing it to other energy efficiency programs that utilities use, relatively cost effective. It just didn't wield great savings. O-Power was bought by Oracle the following year, so I don't think that they exist, but their institutional history probably does, and I bet PG&E has a massive slide deck or something that they could bring to us. They do have all of the you know, gas sales data, they know how many square feet your house is, you know, they could do the analysis if we paid them to do so. I mean, that's something they'd probably charge a fee to run this type of program, and it's very difficult for PG&E to run geographically limited programs. Those tend to be very expensive because it requires a lot of programming work for them. I've never encountered a program that involved PG&E on that level that was like less than $1 million. I mean, it just, anything that involves adjustments to their billing system types of things or customized reports tend to require a lot of programming and tend to be very expensive. I'm not dismissing it, I'm just saying that's my experience in working with PG&E. And then there will be a lot of questions that started to be raised here about how do you slice and dice it. PG&E won't know if you're an owner or a renter because that's just not contained in their data set as far as I know. They would know what's multifamily and what's single family. They know how many square feet. They know, you know, a lot of things about your home. But there are other things like, you know, the results would really vary depending on things like, do you have a hot tub or do you have an EV if you've gone all electric? How many people are in your household? How old is your home? That's both good and bad. It means for like, maybe you shouldn't be compared to your neighbor's house. But on the other hand, it would allow you to have a more specific recommendation to the household. Like they might know if you've pulled a permit, or the city would know if they've pulled a permit on a water heater in the last 10 years. And if they haven't, then maybe you say, we noticed that you haven't pulled a water heating permit in the last 10 years, so you might be a good candidate for a heat pump water heater, and here's an extra $1,000 if you do so. So, you know, it's sort of like you could use that opportunity to leverage other available programs and customizing recommendations. So anyway, that's just a lot of rambling, but I feel like inviting PG&E to present might be an eye-opening experience.
I really like this as a broader, more general idea. So maybe not so much investing the labor time to dial it down at the household level, but perhaps investing a small amount of staff time, like say the sub 10K amount staff time, to arrive at what's average, because the single family homes in this town are almost all the same size. And so you could say this is average if you have a gas furnace and a gas water heater and a gas stove. This is average. You can adjust on your own time, up or down, if you don't have one of those things. This is your average, and this would be just the same information communicated to all property owners. And a lot of renters, I think, also rent single-family homes in this town. Just as a nudge, so same principle, like giving people a nudge, like there's an action you can take. And maybe also just sharing the information that this is like the second biggest thing you can do. Like number one, choose your transportation. Number two, if you are empowered to make this change, just do it. I think reaching out to homeowners and landlords. I have no idea how you would do that analysis for buildings, though, because they're all different. But definitely single-family homes, and there's a lot of single-family homes in this town. So I love the spirit of sending out the nudge and really showing people that it's time. Now's the time. If you can do it, now's the time, and here are the incentives that exist.
I was going to say, I like the direction of the thinking because, as Nick pointed out in the public comment, you know, Nick had worked on this point of sale electrification, kind of idea, which is great because you've got a huge amount of incentive at that moment, but those moments don't happen very often. This is addressing the issue of we really want to reach a large number of people quickly and you know in the here and now time frame. So I like that part of it. So I think there's some merit there. As Nick said, the point of sale electrification is also an interesting program, but that's different than what you're talking about, so that's fine. So I think that there's some I like the comments about, PG&E and what the staff can do. So I think there's some area for development of this. I agree that I wouldn't want to have it just be, hey, you're a huge user, and get that kind of communication. That would kind of turn me off. But coupled with education and information, and I think there's some room for development of this program. So I would say yes to that, but I would say not the way that was originally just encapsulated.
Maybe also building on that, in addition to individual action items, which is, electrify as quickly as possible, maybe collective goals even could be attached to that. Like, we can, as a city, reduce our emissions this much if this many of us make this change. And having a collective goal, maybe even putting it on the website where we can all see what progress we're making. Maybe you get to update your own when you make a change.
Yeah, that's back to the carbon-free Albany website, right?
It's the same concept,
Yeah.
definitely,
Which
but
is
maybe
great.
just
I mean,
more
and maybe
like
it's-
on blast to the world,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
easy for anybody to
Yeah.
see.
I mean, I'm just, saying we do have that resource, and so that's a great opportunity, like you said, to reinvigorate that maybe,
Yeah.
or point people back to that. And also, I liked your comment about, here's the top things you can do. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we could remind people of that all the time. It'd be nice. We'll just be nags. That's our job, just nag everybody every month. Have you got a bus pass?
If there are no other comments, I think we could move on to the next item.
Could I?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Thank you for the impressive thoughtfulness of your comments. I really appreciate that. I hadn't heard the proposal mentioned. It hadn't occurred to me to think of it as shaming. But looking at it from that point of view really chills my interest in the idea. But what you were saying, if the data exists in one of Albany's weekly emails, we could just say the annual average gas use for a typical Albany home per year is X, or maybe X per square foot. And then include what people can do about it. That sounds like a very low cost, something that doesn't even cost $1,000 maybe. And it might not move the needle much, but it might move the needle. So that would be a way to simplify this a whole lot. And maybe get some bang for negligible bucks. So Michelle, do you happen to know, are the data available? Could you calculate something like that?
So I do have data for the total residential gas use in the city per year. So I can get an average for all units. It's not broken down by like single family versus multifamily or anything like that. So in that sense, it's a little bit trickier, although theoretically I could get a pretty good estimate of square footage for residential units. It wouldn't be perfect, but I could probably, spend an hour figuring out like a rough average of gas use per square foot. But yeah, it would be somewhat limited in how specific and accurate it could be, because I wouldn't be able to kind of drill down into like single family average versus multifamily average. And I don't know off the top of my head just how much variation there is, but it's something I could look into more.
Okay. And another idea maybe, I'm not sure how much we would have to pay, but if we told asked PG&E for this zip code, 94706, could you tell us the annual average gas use for single-family homes, and even better, gas use per square foot for single-family homes? Because if we could get that number for a modest amount, maybe even free, then that would go a long way towards what she was just talking about.
Yeah, it's definitely something I could look into to see if that's available. I have no idea off the top of my head how easy that would be, but I could, ask my contacts and see if it's within the realm of possibility.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
I wonder also, per Dan's idea of reaching out to PG&E, if they have somebody on their, Go team, who might be able to give us those figures, not for us here in Albany, but generically, like if your home is this size and these are your appliances, this is what it usually is. They might already just have that sitting somewhere. Sorry that I have no idea what the eco person would be called over there. There's probably 100 of them.
Member Melgen, do you feel like you got enough feedback from the committee for your work as a subcommittee?
Yes, I did. Thank you. Appreciate that very much.
Okay, I'll just jump in quickly and say that it's 8:51. We have subcommittee updates and future agenda items left. So if anyone would like to extend the meeting, we could take a motion for that.
Can I make a motion to extend the meeting till 9:15?
Well, it's my fault, so I'll make a motion to extend.
So, did you make the motion? Yeah, okay, I'll second. To 9:15, yeah.
Okay, Member Fasoon,
Yes.
Member Hodges,
Yes.
Member Larson,
Yes.
Member Lieberman,
Yes.
Member Melgen,
Yes.
Member Vahil McClanahan,
Yes.
Chair Mohammed.
Yes. Okay, would we make a motion on this item, or?
There's no need for a motion on this item. I think the feedback is fine unless Member Melgen has a specific motion that he'd like. Member Melgen, we did speak a little while ago about the name of the subcommittee potentially having a motion, if you want to bring that up, or we can just move right along.
Let's move along.
Then we can move on to the next item, which is subcommittee updates. Okay, for student outreach subcommittee, we've been working on connecting with teachers at school, specifically like ed set students, and I think Mira has something to add as well.
Yeah, I can jump in here real quick. So following the meeting that we had last month, where Kim Chutane came, she followed up with me after the meeting, and so I shared some resources that were approved that I could send them by the STEAM group here at UC Berkeley. So they, in like further discussion with them, they said like next semester they may have capacity to like directly work with us on new materials, but there is already like a base set of a lot of different topics and presentations. Like this semester, they're focusing on renewable energy and environmental justice and environmental racism. So they already have like pre-made slides, and they have experience teaching in elementary school classrooms. So we're definitely going to keep an open collaboration with them. So I sent those resources over to Kim Chutane, and kind of going forward, we're going to kind of figure out next steps in terms of like reaching out to teachers and reaching out to faculty and staff at AHS. So that's kind of where climate literacy stuff is going.
Any questions for the subcommittee? Chair, we could do public comment and discussion for each subcommittee, or we could kind of go through all of the subcommittee updates and then do public comment and discussion at the end, whichever you like.
I think we can do like all the updates right now. Or any other updates?
I mean, zero energy transportation. Yeah, so this is so Troy and Dan and I met with Ken McCroskey, and we reported on that last meeting in an informal way, and so we just wanted to put into the record what we talked about. So this kind of goes into just a summary of what we talked about and the different areas that Dan, Troy, and I are interested in pursuing as far as researching and potentially bringing into proposals for action. And so here's the areas of interest. Dan was interested in the curbside public EV charging, especially in front of commercial properties. Troy was interested in commercial parking charging and pole-mounted EV chargers. And I'm interested in the city-owned properties and fleet electrification. So those are sort of the areas that we're planning to research and bring forward. So Dan and Troy, do you have any updates you want to provide now?
Sure, I can give one update on the utility pole-mounted EV chargers and some of the reasoning behind that. I think in previous meetings we've discussed some of the challenges with some of the more prime locations for public charging, being some of the sidewalks being too narrow, potential underground and utilities. So this is an interesting model where the chargers are on utility poles or streetlight poles, where you're trying to avoid some of those issues that might arise with taking up street space. So far, I have looked at pilot programs run in Oregon in 2 cities in Portland General Electric territory, where they have the level 2 chargers, as they're called. They're slightly more powerful than ones that plug into a 120 volt. These are 240 volt chargers that they've got attached to the poles. Use some app to sign up and activate it. They even have like a little thing where the charger comes down and then you get to use it. I have found there are some challenges there setting up programs like this. The ownership structure can be difficult if the utility owns the pole, kind of working with them to get stuff installed. There can also be regulatory things I need to look into if PG&E would even be able to install their own chargers. I know East Bay Community Energy has done some chargers. They've worked with cities, so that could also be a model to work with them. And then as far as the street lights, that could be a more straightforward path, because presumably the city owns those, unless I'm wrong. But I'm not sure how many of those have 240 volts. The voltage needed for these higher powered chargers. So yeah, exploring a few things there to see if this could also be a potential program or pilot to get some funding towards and get around some of the barriers we've run into so far with charging on public properties.
Okay. I just was going to give a quick update on what I've been working on. So I contacted Michelle about like how to start getting started on fleet electrification and city properties, and she directed me back to a presentation that Lizzie had done actually a couple years ago that I actually was on the committee at the time. So a little chagrin to know that she actually presented on fleet electrification back when I was on the committee. Anyway, so I started in on that. I haven't read the whole report, so I need to look at that. So Lizzie had done some work on hire a consultant to look at fleet electrification. But the short answer is all the different departments in the city have their own vehicles, and people make their decisions on fleet renewal. And so it's kind of like, there's not one like sort of common source. So a good idea, I thought, was Michelle directed me back to my city council appointer or appointee? I'm the appointee. Anyway, talk to them about, Robin's mine. So I was going to talk to Robin about sort of just the general idea about fleet electrification. But today's discussion really kind of inspired me to think, maybe I shouldn't try to run around the city and do everything myself. That maybe I should propose that we get a proposal that City Council resolves to roll fleet electrification in as needed, or appoint somebody to research how to implement fleet electrification. So I think I'm going to start working on a proposal to bring to committee next month as a draft, probably. Along those lines. And the same thing for charging stations and city property. Rather than me going down to the community center and trying to find out who's in charge and whether they want one, maybe just proposing that we get a consultant to look into this and figure out how we would put charging stations on city property. So that's where I'm at this point.
I think we can move on to public comment.
Yeah, beginning with public comment. First speaker, you may begin when you're ready.
Glad to hear people talking about the subcommittee actions. This is really where a lot happens in the Climate Action Committee. This is Nick Peterson. So about I was glad to see an actual presentation from the EV working group. I think you nailed it as far as where the focus should be. And I specifically like what Eric said about moving forward with the city fleet electrification. I remember that report very vividly, specifically because it talked about doing the electrification in the next 10 years, and 2 of those years are already gone, so in the next 8 years, of the city fleet exclusive of safety vehicles, which included the police cruisers. And in my opinion, the #1 electrified vehicle should be the police cruisers, because they're the most visible, because they're the most used, because they reflect the city's outlook on their community and what they think about them, and because it's doable in other city police forces around the country that have already done the work for them. So I suggest, if anything, even if it's that little vehicle that goes out and tags the car tires, which is still a gas Cushman, it's not an electric vehicle. I don't know why. But I think there's lots to be done there that the city could show a real lead on. So I strongly recommend that you bring that quickly to City Council and tell them to ramp up the electrification plan, that highly visible city vehicles need to show the city's commitment to decarbonization and having, they really are gas hogs, these big Ford police cruisers. They're the typical one that every city uses. And even though they're hybrid, they only get about 25, 30 miles per gallon, which is horrible for a vehicle that generally is just sitting around all day and not really doing anything. Electric vehicle in pursuit is going to be way faster than those vehicles. So I know there are a lot of arguments about why they can't be used, but if you go Google police electric vehicle and see all the places that have turned to them, including fleets of EV Mustangs, you'll see that the police officers are soon convinced that these are superior cars. They're more comfortable, they're more responsive, they're more controllable, and it's something I think City of Albany would really be proud about if that happened within their city. So anyway, I'm very glad to see this is moving ahead. I encourage you to work rapidly and quickly and just get something to the City Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. I believe that concludes public comment.
Okay, now it's time for discussion and I guess possible action.
We did have one hand raised after public comment closed, if you'd like to reopen it. or we can keep it closed and continue with discussion.
Sure, let's open it up.
Returning to public comments. You may begin when you're ready.
Yes, this is Lucinda Young, and I'm going to be just very, very brief. I think it's really important that the city set an example, that the city government walk its talk. We're going to be asking and encouraging the community to move towards electrification. It's really important that our city fleet move towards electrification. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we can now move on to discussion and any comments. If there is nothing, then
I just have a quick question, maybe for Michelle or for you. When do we need to have a submittal for an agenda item for the next meeting?
Future agenda items is up next.
Okay. And that's the moment. There,
That
not
would be
after
the
that.
moment for, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
all right. We can now move on to future agenda items. Are there any requests for future agenda items?
I'll take the, yeah, so I'll, to review a proposal for fleet electrification to be delivered by committee member Larson. I'll just go with one for now, so.
I was curious about Jeff Bond's reference to a future agenda item regarding that working plan, and if that's, whether it's next meeting or if we can get some kind of update or forecast next meeting.
That's a great question. I got an email about it just as I was leaving the office today, so I don't have the answers just yet. I think it'll either be November or December, I believe, that we'll be discussing it, but I can give you an update on it next meeting, even if we don't get into the weeds.
I had one proposed item. A couple of commenters had urged this committee to make a climate emergency declaration. So I would be interested in learning more about, I guess, what, local cities around here, Berkeley and El Cerrito mentioned, I guess, what that looks like and what a declaration enables the city to enact on in a more pressing way on climate action. Just to understand, what a declaration would unlock.
I'd like to maybe talk a little more, propose an agenda item for a little more discussion of a potential climate action coordinator role. I don't want it to be super rambling and formless, so if this does make the potential agenda, maybe I could ask some questions of staff between now and the next meeting and get some shape to what that discussion could be like. Things that I would want to discuss are like, would this be the same as the sustainability coordinator role or different? And what sort of extra help at the city level might be helpful for staff? And also, I think, how would funding work, or funding options?
Any other agenda items?
I'll see if I can find the time, but for the use of all of us, I could try to develop, or maybe somebody already has, just a list of what individuals can do to reduce their climate footprint. So include in their EVs, home heat pumps, taking Amtrak instead of flying, all different kinds of things. I mean, there's probably a million people who've done this sort of thing, but I haven't seen it pinned down. So I'll talk to Michelle offline about whether this would be a useful thing to do. And if I could come up with anything, then the presentation would be just, here's a spreadsheet, here's what I came up with. But I'd be interested to know, we have maybe possibly $250K to spend, and where would we get the most bang for the buck? Thank you.
All right. I think we can move on to public comment.
Yeah, I'll note we have 2 hands raised and 5 minutes left on the clock, so we can either extend or reduce the comment time.
I think we should extend meeting time. Any motions?
Motion to extend 5 minutes?
Second that.
Okay. Committee member Fasoon,
Yes.
member Hodges,
Yes.
member Larson,
Yes.
member Lieberman,
Yes.
member Melgen,
Yes.
member Vahil McClanahan,
Yes.
Chair Mohammed.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
We'll move on to public comment now. You may begin when you're ready.
Nick Peterson, I wanted to praise the committee members for really coming up with some good ones here. I especially feel it's important to start discussing the work plan, and even though that's in kind of a limbo, you need to have a plan to guide you, and on that plan should be the priority items, the gas pruning project and other things. So once you get that on the agenda, you can discuss many things under that as far as what the committee should be prioritizing. And I think you've got a good handle on that. I also think it's worth talking further about what a truly dedicated climate action coordinator for the city would do. That they would have a high level of authority and focus and access to a lot of information. It would not be the sustainability coordinator working under Jeff Bond. That would stifle them too much, and they wouldn't be able to do the kind of putting together programs that would need to happen. So I really encourage you to make that something to discuss, because I think the city is a little rudderless on, I mean, there's good work going on, but it's not clear that we're accomplishing. For example, with the tree plan, yes, we got a tree plan, but did we plant any trees, and when is that canopy coming in? We don't know. We have no plan for how that's going to happen. Yes, we've come up with kind of an EV action plan, but what is it? Where are the items that are promoting it? Yes, we put in a few chargers in some apartment buildings. I don't know, 6, 10. I mean, at that rate, in 20 years, we may have it covered or so. So again, we have stuff started, but who's keeping an eye on whether we're really getting to the goal, and where are the milestones? And they can't just be milestones 15, 20 years out. That doesn't work. No one that's here now is going to be here in 20 years. So we have to have more consistency. So I think having that person as a strong, consistent cross-council appointee hired person that's managing the plan is really critical. And I think the city manager will see that as critical too. This is going to become more and more important as we see worse and worse climate conditions coming along, and more heat waves, more and more disasters, more and more global citizens traveling all over trying to find places to live. So this is the reality, and we need to address it quickly, and we need to get serious, and that's the way to do it. So please do put it on the agenda and keep talking about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Moving on to the next speaker. You may begin when you're ready.
Yes, I'll try to be brief. I have 3 suggestions. First of all, as I stated at the last month's meeting, I think it is important that we declare a climate emergency And there is a website, climateemergencydeclaration.org, that has a lot of information. It lists 2,348 jurisdictions and 40 countries have declared climate emergencies. Why would we want to declare a climate emergency? It's a determination that we are in an emergency situation and that all city decisions should be made with an eye to their impact on our climate action plan, and that's currently not happening. Departments act separately. Lots of decisions are made without any consideration at all of their climate impact. Second, my suggestion, we do need to have a working plan. I know Jeff Bond mentioned that there were some changes that were going to be made, but I don't think that impacts the fact that a plan was supposed to have been implemented beginning July 1st, and we don't have one. And third, there have been some discussions in previous meetings about a plastic foodware reduction ordinance. I think it's Zero Waste has issued a model ordinance, and I know Michelle had said that it was being worked on, but I haven't heard anything about it for a few months, and I do think that's important as well. Thank you. Thanks everybody for an excellent meeting tonight and for all your hard work on this committee.
Thank you very much. That concludes public comment.
All right, let's go ahead and adjourn. Our next meeting will be November 15th. See you then. Thank you.